Now the War of 1812 commemorative banner and medal will be escorted to the front of the room by two members of the Canadian Forces. Maintenant, la médaille et la bannière commémorative de la guerre de 1812 seront escortées à l'avant de la pièce par deux membres des forces canadiennes. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir. Distinguished guests, Mesdames et Messieurs, on behalf of their Excellencies, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Rideau Hall this morning for this national ceremony to recognize the contribution and sacrifices of First Nations and Métis communities to the War of 1812. Au nom de leurs Excellences, il me fait plaisir de vous accueillir à Rideau Hall pour cette cérémonie nationale soulignant la contribution et les sacrifices des communautés des Métis et des Premières Nations à la guerre de 1812. Before we begin the ceremony, I would like to invite Elder José White Duck from Kitigan-Zibi to offer a welcoming prayer. Avant de commencer la cérémonie, j'aimerais inviter l'aîné José White Duck à offrir une prière. Elder White Duck.
I'm going to burn a little bit of sage, just to have the good spirit around us. This is a very big day for everyone, for our people. So I will light the sage, and my English name, like she says, is Josie White Duck. And my native name is Kiwenumigusque. I guess it's not meant to be. My matches are not working. Welcome, Your Excellency, Prime Minister, parliamentarians, elders, and all invited guests here today, and those who are receiving. Welcome you. It's so nice to get together here in the territory of the Algonquin people. I will say my prayer in my language, because to me that's where it comes from my heart. And I would pray for peace, that we can all walk in peace and unity to work together as human beings. And I pray, I offer this prayer in my language if you want to stand up. Jemanido. Jimmy Gwetchniki the Mendesh Nongum Gishagaki Mando say I want Shema. When I was my any way back Nongum Gishagak on the She. Me Gwetchniki the men on Jane Dish Piming Nakak in the gay go and skak. I should get on the Shema King I don't Madzu. Kenaga Madzu watch. I said down the Shema Gamose watch. Mi gwachnik do men jamne donja. Kena was go gab mo sewa pan gevinawa. Nas ke abach ke bishabach. Un jenny biga yesh kude ne sewin. Mi jim ga yege mi jang num gum gishugag mi gwach. So when mishnan ga gwede men dashtim shkauzian, twido kadadian. Ki me ga kina ge go in the benda. Mi gwach un jeya. So when a mission man go in the academy, when Jack and I was to go get copies away back in the Mongom the Skishuga, and the Togas win get watch was to go mark Connie watch. When Jack and I Schnabek, me watch. Thank you, Great Spirit, for our day today. Thank you for giving us life and for all the people gathered here today. For all the people who walked this road, excuse me, before us, and those who are yet to come. We thank you for the fire, the water, the air that we breathe, and the air, and the earth. We thank you for all life. I say miigwech, yeah.
Thank you for this prayer, Elder White Duck. To begin, I would like to invite His Excellency, the Right Honorable David Johnston, to speak. J'inviterai tout d'abord le gouverneur général à nous adresser la parole.
Prime Minister, elders, National Chief Chartier, Minister Duncan, parliamentarians, General Tinchuk, First Nations and Métis representatives, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my wife Sharon and I are so delighted to welcome you to Rideau Hall, the home of the people of Canada, for this important commemorative ceremony. Let me begin by acknowledging that this gathering is taking place on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Nation, which spans the provinces of Ontario and Quebec. Throughout my mandate, I've been fortunate to meet with Aboriginal peoples from across Canada including at the Crown First Nations gathering here in Ottawa earlier this year. At that gathering, I was deeply honored to be presented with a sacred gift of friendship and diplomacy in the form of a wampum belt. I want you to know that this wampum belt occupies a central place here at Rideau Hall as a reminder of the covenant that binds us and of my responsibilities as a representative of the Crown, and in recognition of the wampum belt's great significance to our relationship, we brought it with us to the ballroom today, just on the right. Like the wampum belt, this ballroom itself can be seen as a symbol of our ties, with the portrait of Her Majesty the Queen sharing the room with paintings by some of Canada's greatest Aboriginal artists. In their variety, these artworks remind us that the story of Canada, one of diverse peoples striving to live together in peace and harmony, began with the Aboriginal experience. En tant que Gouverneur Général,
as Governor General and Commander-in-Chief of Canada, I often speak of diversity. Diversity is one of our country's greatest strengths. And the history of the War of 1812 offers us an example of that which remains true today. That despite our differences, Canada is our common ground. And we're stronger when we work together. The War of 1812 was a complex and costly conflict that is difficult to summarize briefly. It was a tragedy because war, lest we forget, means that we failed to achieve our ends peacefully. Parts of what are now Canada and the United States were turned into battlefields, and the suffering caused was very real. But the war also left a number of important legacies, and it vividly demonstrated two facts that I'd like to highlight today: our ability to cooperate and the vital contributions of First Nations and Métis people to this country.
Warriors and British and French-speaking soldiers who fought alongside one another in the War of 1812 each had their own unique reasons for uniting in battle. The point I wish to make is that not only was cooperation necessary, it was successful, thanks in no small part to the remarkable contributions of First Nations and Métis peoples. From the outbreak of the war to its conclusion, Aboriginal people were essential to the defense of Canada. Despite the 2 centuries that have passed since the War of 1812, I am struck by the continuities between then and now. Of course, some things have changed significantly, and for the better. For one, we are now fortunate to live peacefully to the north of the world's longest undefended border. But I do not think our present-day friendship with our American neighbors means that Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians need each other less today than we did 200 years ago. As with our past and our present, our future in this country will be shared, and I do not think our chances of success any less than they were in 1812. As Governor General, I've been calling on Canadians to imagine ways to build a smarter, more caring society. One way we do this is by understanding and by honoring the essential contributions of First Peoples to Canada. And that is why I'm so pleased to participate in this national recognition ceremony today. As Commander-in-Chief and head of the Canadian Heraldic Authority, it is an honor to present you and your communities with the War of 1812 commemorative banners and medals. On behalf of Her Majesty the Queen and all Canadians, I offer my thanks to the First Nations and Métis peoples of this land for your assistance in our time of need. Thank you.
Merci, Excellence. I would now like to invite the Right Honourable Stephen Harper to the podium. J'inviterai maintenant le Premier ministre du Canada à nous adresser la parole. Mr. Harper.
Votre Excellence, Governor General.
Your Excellency, Governor General Johnson, Sharon Johns,
General Latinchuk, National Chief Chartier, chefs des aînés, chiefs and elders, distingués invités, mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen. Canadians rightly pride themselves upon our country's peaceful character. Yet, as with so many other nations, Canada's existence as a separate country was not peacefully conceded. Had Canadians, Aboriginal, French, English, and others, not repelled an American invasion during the 3-year struggle that we remember today as the War of 1812, our country could not have come into being. Recently, our government announced our intention to award battle honours to the regiments of the Canadian Army, which link their roots to the militia units that helped defend Canada during that time. Nous sommes aujourd'hui réunis.
Together we gather in historic Rideau Hall to commemorate the First Nations and Métis warriors who fought so gallantly alongside the English and French Canadian militias as well as British regiments. They did so from the very beginning, and they fought to the very end.
To commemorate the First Nations and Métis warriors who fought so gallantly alongside the English and French Canadian militias as well as British regiments. They did so from the very beginning, and they fought to the very end. In doing so, your ancestors made a great and critical contribution to Canada, one without which events might well have ended very differently. Let me describe briefly how important and how valuable that contribution was. At Detroit, just days after the outbreak of hostilities, the mere threat of deploying Aboriginal warriors, Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi, and Shawnee under the great leader Tecumseh, allowed General Isaac Brock to negotiate the surrender of the American fort. And although Brock was killed in action at Queenston Heights 200 years ago this month, Haudenosaunee Iroquois warriors played a vital part in the defeat of the invaders in that battle as well. Almost exactly a year later, the warriors again of the Ojibwa, Odawa, Potawatomi, and Shawnee again fought at the Battle of the Thames. There, the First Nations suffered a great loss when Tecumseh himself fell, fighting a larger American force to the bitter end. Mais malgré la défaite,
in spite of the defeat, the First Nations kept up their vital contribution to the defence of Canada. At the Battle of Châteauguay, whose 199th anniversary is tomorrow, there was a force made up of members of the French Canadian militia under the command of Lieutenant Colonel de Salaberry and their First Nations allies. These combatants, who counted Algonquin, Mohawk, Huron, and Abenaki warriors among their numbers, defeated a much larger American force. This victory permanently dashed the Americans' hopes of attaining a key strategic objective, the taking of Montreal and the fortress of Quebec City.
3 long years, Métis warriors served against the American invaders in the Corps of Canadian Voyageurs and in the Commissariat of Voyageurs throughout the conflict. First Nations people under talented and courageous leaders, among whom Oshawana, John Norton, and John Brant won lasting glory, were at every major battle throughout the war. Michilimackinac, I had to work on that one. Michilimackinac, where Dakota and Ojibwe warriors assisted British forces in taking an American fort. Fort George, Stony Creek, Beaver Dams, Chrysler's Farm, Lundy's Lane, to name just some of the most well-remembered. Donc, les Autochtones du Canada ont été à tous.
Thus, Canada's original peoples were in every sense key to the victory that firmly established Canada as a distinct country in North America.
Original peoples were, in every sense, key to the victory that firmly established Canada as a distinct country in North America. Now, of course, much has changed in 200 years. The war, contrary to a lot of expectations of the time, ushered in a long peace between Canada and the United States. The Americans are now our great friends and allies. Canada is a peaceful and prosperous federation stretching from coast to coast to coast. Yet one of the constants over the decades has been the loyal service to Canada of its Aboriginal peoples during times of great need. De la guerre des Boers,
On the Boer War, through both the First and Second World Wars, the Korean War and the Afghan conflict, the courage and fighting spirit of Canada's Aboriginal peoples have been important national assets.
Through both the First and Second World Wars, Korea and Afghanistan, the courage and fighting spirit of Canada's Aboriginal peoples have been important national assets. As indeed today, the presence of many of you, who I see are indeed veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces, tells us. Our modest remembrances here today are then their natural due. Now, ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of the War of 1812 and in recognition of their valor, Aboriginal communities were presented with military banners and King George III medals. So it will be today. Les communautés des Premières Nations et Métis.
Successor First Nations and Métis communities will shortly be presented with a Canadian Forces War of 1812 commemorative banner and the specially struck War of 1812 commemorative medals.
Presented with the Canadian Forces War of 1812 commemorative banner and the specially struck War of 1812 commemorative medals. Both banner and medal reflect the strong connection of Canada's First Nations to the Crown. Both contain the image of Queen Elizabeth II and were approved by Her Majesty. They are bestowed today as symbols of an unbreakable bond forged in a common struggle. The war we commemorate today and the part in it played by Aboriginal Canadians did more than preserve a boundary. It also established a national consciousness that defines us to this day. Hommes et femmes, Anglais et
Men and women, English and French, Aboriginal and other. People of very different horizons, from very different cultures, uniting in battle to stem an invasion. They established our Canadian national identity.
We are still a nation of diversity. People from many backgrounds striving together to define a unique and special country. That is how we began. It is how we shall move forward. Today, we remember and we honor the vital and priceless role that our Aboriginal peoples played along the border 2 centuries ago for the lasting benefit of all of us. As Prime Minister and on behalf of all Canadians, I would like to once again express to their descendants our recognition, our appreciation, and our esteem. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. The next speaker, Chief Isidore Day from Serpent River First Nation, will talk about the 1764 Niagara Wampum Belt and the importance of the First Nations and Crown Alliance. J'aimerais maintenant inviter le chef Isidore Day de la Première Nation Serpent River à nous adresser la parole. Chief Day.
Bonjour. Ngwisque Mikisinani Indigenous cause. Isidore do Zoganashi, Ganoje do dem. Kegatsana Chin and Dagweg Mangwang Monpi, Nongwa Nichke Win Gawin Waya Wat. My name is Isidore Day. I'm the elected chief of Serpent River First Nation, as well as the Lake Huron Regional Grand Chief for the Anishinaabe Nation. Kindly, I would like to, first of all, acknowledge the Kitaganzi being territory in which we are convening this meeting. And I would like to thank the elders, the citizens, Chief White Duck, and the ancestors of this territory. I would as well like to take a moment here to acknowledge the elder in the opening reflection and prayers. The Creator has once again freely given us sustenance and vision. We acknowledge these gifts and recognize our humanity for another day. Veterans, elders, Grand Chiefs, Chiefs, Delegates, Ani, bonjour. Governor General, Prime Minister, Minister Duncan, the military, dignitaries, esteemed guests, good morning, and thank you for being here with us for this very important event. I want to make special acknowledgement and introduce to you Mr. Art Mwasigi, elder and veteran from Serpent River First Nation, who served in the Canadian military as a proud Anishinaabe warrior. The wampum belt that I have been instructed to bring to this significant commemoration is the 1764 Treaty of Niagara wampum belt. It's displayed here. References the vital importance of the covenant chain. This treaty belt is as important to the First Peoples and the settler government on this day, today, as it was when presented at the crooked place that they call Niagara, where over 2,000 of our people gathered to assert their sovereignty. During Sir William Johnson's tenure as Indian Superintendent for the Northern Province representing the English King from 1755 to 1774, wampum diplomacy was an important institution that we recognize here as well on this day in your House, Governor General. As such, Governor General Johnson, Prime Minister Harper, in your respective roles and authorities, we seek to not see this War of 1812 commemoration as a moment to recognize this great history of alliance. We seek to make once again the covenant chain a bond that shines of friendship, peace, and prosperity. Only this time, the Anishinaabe are treated with honor, respect, and dignity so that our children can be proud of their ancestry without the pain of poverty or the confusion of betrayal. We as chiefs and warriors of our representative First Nations petition you, the Crown, to recognize this ceremony as a formal request to polish the covenant chain and displace any tendency of nostalgia or faint pondering of history. This day is critical to your place in your institution that is known as the honor of the Crown. I bring these sacred items that I am presenting to the Crown and its government from my people and on behalf of the Anishinaabe Nation. We as First Nations people long desired to collaborate with you and chip away at the tarnish and dark stains that have been left on this sacred chain as a result of infractions and impositions of colonial pursuits and injudicious ways that your forefathers treated the first people here on Turtle Island. There was a history surrounding the great battle called the War of 1812, where our people would offer as gifts to you weapons, our war clubs, in peace and alliance. And I must be clear on behalf of the Anishinaabe people, we cannot do this at this point in history. It is now you that we struggle against the Crown in many cases in the federal government. It is you that we now fight in an effort to eliminate poverty and pain in our people. We struggle with imposed legislation called the Indian Act that had nothing to do with pre-Confederate treaties or the sacred wampums. These colonial laws are in fact contrary to the agreement and the recognition of the 1764 Treaty of Niagara, where our sovereignty was sanctified as part of our relationship. Governor General, Prime Minister, we must take time to polish that chain. We must begin with peace, prayer, and petitioning the true spirit and intent of our pre-Confederate treaties. I come here seeking your honor and with a duty to present a sacred pipe to you, Governor General. This pipe is not to be seen as a token or an inanimate object. We have been advised that this must be done, and this was done through ceremony. We ensured that through those ceremonies that were conducted to make clear the gesture of passing the sacred pipe, that we implored to you to seek out any and all resolve in polishing this covenant chain. We ask you to work with us, Governor General, to make clear the path in a season that is close at hand and not anywhere in the distant future. Governor General Johnson, today these chiefs and veterans represent a direct lineage of their ancestors and warriors that upheld a diplomatic set of commitments and concessions that were not to be infringed upon, that would not have their sovereignty infringed upon. In fact, the very nature of the wampum obligations were based on recognition and respect